Now, just in case you missed it, John Herdman recently did an interview where he talked about Canada's chances at the upcoming Concacaf Nations League and Gold Cup this summer and what type of squad he wanted to bring for both tournaments. So today, for this episode, I'm going to dissect those comments, build a 23-man roster that I think he potentially could bring, as well as some players who can stand out. So hopefully you guys are excited, and if you are, as always, be sure to drop a like, drop a sub, and let's get into the episode now. Canada, I think it's time. So does John Herdman, and so do the players. They have made it very clear that their objective this summer is to win the Concacaf Nations League and the Gold Cup. The US and Mexico have had a lot of success in recent years, and Canada has not won a major trophy since the 2000 Gold Cup, and that is honestly what other soccer fans from Concacaf keep saying about the Canadians. You don't have that recent success despite doing well in CONCACAF World Cup qualifying and going to a World Cup. You need to start getting some silverware. Well, John Herdman thinks that the pressure is still on the US and Mexico, but maybe it's time this summer for Canada to do something special.
We've come out of that World Cup and there's a confidence level there in the players. I think you've seen that at BMO Field and the matches against Curacao. They were some good performances, and they were able to hit some levels statistically they haven't hit against CONCACAF teams. So, it bodes well. I think going into that Nations League final, it'll be our first final. So we'll be dealing with that, with the pressure of a trophy right around the corner. And you've got a US team who are the current holders, who I'm absolutely sure will be saying the same thing. So for us, we're still carrying that little bit of a high of a World Cup, and we'll bring that excitement in. There's not much pressure on us to go and win it other than the pressure we're putting on ourselves. I mean, this is the pressure for the US and Mexico, who are the perennials. But, I think for us internally, we desperately want to feel that winning feeling. We had it a little bit in the CONCACAF run, but we still didn't lift a trophy at the end of that. And that's the feeling we're all waiting for.
If Canada want to achieve something special this summer, you would have to imagine they need to bring their A squad to both tournaments. However, that's not always the case, as a couple years back, the US brought their A squad to the Concacaf Nations League and then a B/C squad for different reasons to the Gold Cup. They won both tournaments and had a very successful summer, but the players who featured in the Nations League had the rest of the summer off. John Herdman made it clear that he wants to bring a similar squad to both tournaments, but for different reasons, some players may not be able to feature.
Yeah, it'll be tricky, really tricky. I mean, my goal is to carry one squad through. We're looking at it as 8 games across hopefully 2 finals and 2 trophies to win. I think when you look at the European reality, players, some of them will finish in May, some of them even in April. So there's always that challenge of having players in match rhythm, match fitness. Then you have the players that are coming off the back of a season, and we learned that last time. Players like Jonathan David in the last iteration of the Gold Cup, he was carrying an injury and he just needed that off-season to rest it, to get ready for World Cup qualifiers. So you never know. We may have players who have big moves and need to do a pre-season at a new club. So my mission is to make sure the full squad are there for the Nations League, and then once we get through Nations League, we'll assess emotionally, mentally and physically whether the players can go on to what's a pretty hell of a run when you get going in a Gold Cup. The games come thick and fast, and a lot of travel, heat. It's a great competition. I mean, we all love it, but it's just whether or not the players are mentally, emotionally and physically ready to do it.
John Herdman talks about the fact that some players may not be able to feature in tournaments like this because they're injured, need rest, or potentially are getting a transfer. So I'm going to talk about 3 players that I think could fall into that category and 3 players that I think will need to step up if that happens. I'm sorry, Canadian soccer fans, I know you're not going to like hearing this, but Alphonso Davies would fall into that category of potentially missing a tournament because he just picked up a hamstring injury that's going to keep him out for about 6 weeks, and the Nations League kicks off in about 7. Now, yes, that timeline could work out perfectly, but hamstrings are very difficult injuries to recover from. The last thing I would like to see is Alphonso Davies rush back in time for the Nations League and potentially get injured once again. Now, I'm not saying that Davies won't be able to make it back, because if you know anything about Alphonso Davies, he loves playing for Canada. I think there's a great chance that he could potentially be back for it, but if not, and he might need the summer to rest, recover, and be good for next season, then I could potentially see him having to miss both tournaments. On top of that, there has been some transfer news surrounding Alphonso Davies as well, as Real Madrid and Manchester City have shown interest in him, so if a transfer does happen over this summer, and you could potentially see it's the way that things are going at Bayern right now, everything is kind of falling apart, and if Davies is one of the pieces that ends up getting shipped out, that transfer could potentially tie up his time as well. There's no question that if Alphonso Davies does feature in both tournaments, he will be a player to keep an eye on. But if he's not there, it's a giant hole and someone needs to fill it, and that someone is Samuel Adekubi. Adekubi recently got a big move to Galatasaray after Hatayspor's season came to a close, and he has been shining since the move. Adekubi recently joined Galatasaray after Hatayspor's season came to a close, and he's been fantastic since making the move. He has started in 5 matches, he's picked up an assist, and he's really fit into his new club. Galatasaray are currently sitting at the top of the Turkish league, so this was a team that was flying before Adekubi joined them. But the fact that he's joined them, walked into the starting 11, and has played as well as he has been absolutely a fantastic story for him. If Alphonso Davies does miss out on these 2 tournaments, it's the perfect opportunity for Sam Adekubi to work his way back into the starting 11 for Canada. Due to the fact that Herdman has switched to a 3-5-2 system, Davies occupies that left wingback position, which means that Adekubi unfortunately has been on the bench. Without Davies there, the natural replacement for him is Adekubi, so this could be a perfect fit, and he has proven in the past that he can be very successful in playing that role. Adekubi is really enjoying his football at the moment. He's getting better and better with each week that goes by with Galatasaray, and if he continues this type of form leading into the summer, this could be 2 massive tournaments for him. Going from one flank to the other, we are going to take a look at Tajon Buchanan, who also has some transfer activity surrounding him. Tajon has been linked to both Inter Milan and Lazio, and there's a good possibility that he could move this summer. Tajon has had a very successful time with Club Brugge so far, however he's had several different managers and played in many different positions. It's potentially time for him to get that type of move to a top 5 league, get a position that he's going to be thriving in, and play under a manager that will be there long term. If a club like Inter Milan or Lazio does come calling this summer, Buchanan could be tempted to do everything possible to get a deal like that done. It may mean having to miss one of the Nations League or Gold Cup, but it's a serious opportunity for him and I know that he will want to take it. Buchanan joined Club Brugge in January, so we didn't really have that preseason experience. When you move in the summer, it's a bit different, and that preseason experience is very important. Tajon will need to go into a new atmosphere, get used to the club, get used to the players, and hopefully fight his way into the starting 11 under a new manager. If a transfer like this does happen for Buchanan, there's an opportunity there for someone to step up, and that someone for me would be Richie Laryea. Similar to Adekubi, Laryea would be the perfect right wing back replacement for Buchanan under Herdman's 3-5-2 system. In the last international window, Laryea started in the match against Curaçao in that right wing back position and played very well, and then came off the bench for Buchanan in the match against Honduras, and when he came on the pitch, he was absolutely electric. Laryea is also shining for TFC this season. He started in 8 matches, he's already scored 2 goals, picked up an assist, and looks deadly going forward. He's also looking really good on the defensive side of things as well. It's also worth noting that Richie Laryea will be in mid-season form due to the MLS playing throughout the summer, which gives him a fantastic opportunity to shine at these tournaments. The final player who could potentially miss out on these tournaments is Jonathan David. Now, Jonathan David, as we all assume, is going to leave Lille this summer. Lille have made it clear that they're preparing for life after Jonathan David. We've seen Bayern Munich, AC Milan, and some other big clubs looking to target him, so it's probably safe to assume that a big transfer could happen. David will definitely be looking to make sure that this move does happen this summer. It was supposed to take place last summer, but he ended up staying at Lille for another season. Someone will have to replace David in Herdman's 3-5-2 system. That someone could potentially be Ike Ugbo or Ayo Akinola, but to replace David's goals that we would assume he would get, has to go to Kyle Larin. Kyle Larin had a very difficult start to this season with Club Brugge. He barely featured, he was low on confidence, but then he got the transfer to Valladolid where he's absolutely been thriving. So far in La Liga, he's started 8 matches, featured in 11, he's scored 5 goals and picked up 2 assists. Not to mention that Kyle Larin loves scoring goals for Canada. He has 28 goals in 60 appearances and is Canada's current all-time leading goal scorer. You would have to imagine that if Jonathan David doesn't feature in these tournaments, that a lot of the pressure will fall on Kyle Larin and he will have to deliver if Canada wants to find any type of success. Now it is time for the fun part. I'm going to build my predicted 23-man roster for both the Concacaf Nations League and the Gold Cup. Now I'm going to build this 23-man roster with the assumption that every player is available. At the time of recording, there are some players that are injured, and like I mentioned, some players could leave on transfers. Right now, the current injuries for Canada are Samuel Piette, Maxime Crépeau, Alphonso Davies, and Junior Hoilett. All of those players are expected to be back before the Concacaf Nations League. I will provide some replacements for those players, but I am going to try to build what I believe is John Herdman's best 23-man squad. We will do this in a 3-5-2 system, and starting in goal, I've went with Milan Borjan, Maxime Crépeau, and Dane St. Clair. For the right wing back position, I have Tajon Buchanan and Richie Larea, and like I mentioned, if Buchanan does get a transfer and can't feature at these tournaments, I have Dominic Zator as a backup. He would provide coverage for the backup right back as well as the center back positions. Moving on now to the outside right center back position, I have Alistair Johnston and Kyle Hebert. This was a tough one for me, but Hebert's form so far with St. Louis is incredible, and I have him just ahead of Joel Waterman. For the central center back position, I have Stephen Vittoria and Scott Kennedy. No real surprises there, but it is nice to see that Scott Kennedy can feature in this position and play well there. At outside left center back, I have Kamal Miller and Derek Cornelius, two very capable center backs, and I'm excited to see who potentially will be the starter. At left wing back, I have Alphonso Davies and Sam Adekubi, and like I mentioned, if Davies isn't able to feature at one of these tournaments, I would have a player like Liam Miller come in to replace him. Liam Miller has recently been featuring as a left wing back for Basel. He's the last Canadian right now standing in Europe, and John Herdman does trust him. Moving on now to the midfield, the defensive midfielders would be Stefan Eustachio and Victor Laturi. The central midfielders would be Ismail Kone, Samuel Piet, and Marc-Anthony Kaye. And the center attacking midfielders would be Jonathan Osorio and Junior Hoylett. Finally, moving on to the strikers, I have Jonathan David, Kyle Larin, and Ike Ugbo. If David isn't available for one of these tournaments, Ayo Akinola would be the replacement. That is the 23-man squad, and the starting 11 would look something like this. In goal, Milan Borjan. Right wing back, Tajon Buchanan. Outside right center back, Alistair Johnston. Central center back, Stephen Vittoria. Outside left center back, Kamal Miller. Left wing back, Alphonso Davies. Defensive midfielder, Stefan Eustachio. Central midfielder, Ismail Kone. Center attacking midfielder, Jonathan Osorio. The two starting strikers, Jonathan David and Kyle Larin. Now that looks like a starting 11 that I think could go out and win some silverware this summer. But unfortunately, that is all the time we have for in this episode. Let me know down in the comments if you agree with me about the starting 11, with the 23-man squad I picked, even the 3 players that I think could stand out. And if you enjoyed this episode, as always, be sure to drop a like, drop a sub, and we'll see you soon. Cheers, friends!